The 8th Battery Hospital script, hospital staff ignore chest pain patient, then discover she's a Johns Hopkins cardiologist. Hospital staff ignore chest pain patient for hours then discover she's a Johns Hopkins cardiologist. This is completely unacceptable. The words hung heavy in the sterile air of St. Mary's General Hospital, but Dr. Maya Patel didn't flinch. She lay there on the emergency room gurney, chest burning with pain, accused of drug-seeking behavior. The assumptions ironclad, the nursing staff confident in their assessment, the diagnosis practically decided before she even spoke. But there was one thing no one in that emergency department knew: they weren't just dismissing another patient, they were playing a dangerous game with someone who had the power to transform their entire medical system. By the time the truth came out, it wouldn't just be a medical emergency, it would be a reckoning that would shake the foundations of healthcare itself. Stick around, because what happens next will leave you speechless. And before we dive in, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more stories that expose medical bias, deliver justice, and keep you on the edge of your seat. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's General Hospital cast their harsh glow across the emergency department at 2:30 in the morning, creating long shadows that seemed to dance across the polished linoleum floors. It was the kind of hour when exhaustion settled into everyone's bones like a heavy blanket, when even the most experienced medical professionals found their patients wearing thin and their judgment clouded by fatigue. The air carried that distinctive mixture of antiseptic and human suffering that defined emergency rooms everywhere, a cocktail of hope and desperation that Dr. Maya Patel had grown accustomed to over her years in medicine. But tonight she wasn't walking these halls as a physician, she was experiencing them from the other side as a patient in distress. Maya Patel was 28 years old, though the stress lines around her dark eyes made her appear older. In the unforgiving hospital lighting, her long black hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail that had come undone during her restless journey to the emergency room, and she wore simple civilian clothes, a Georgetown University sweatshirt that had seen better days paired with faded jeans and worn sneakers, the kind of casual attire that marked her as just another late-night emergency room visitor. Though the staff wouldn't know that this particular visitor held one of the most prestigious positions in cardiac medicine at one of the nation's most respected medical institutions. The pain had started 3 hours earlier while Maya was reviewing complex cardiac catheterization reports in her modest apartment near Johns Hopkins Hospital. At first she had dismissed it as stress-related tension, something that came with the territory of being one of the youngest assistant chiefs of cardiology in the country. But as the sharp stabbing sensation in her chest intensified and began radiating down her left arm, accompanied by waves of nausea and shortness of breath, Maya's medical training kicked in, overriding her natural tendency to tough it out and work through discomfort. She recognized these symptoms all too well, having diagnosed them in countless patients over her career. The drive to St. Mary's had been a calculated decision. Maya could have gone to Johns Hopkins, where her colleagues would have recognized her immediately and provided VIP treatment, but something about that felt wrong to her. She wanted to be treated like any other patient, to experience the healthcare system as her patients did, without the privilege and special treatment that came with her professional status. It was a decision she would soon come to regret, though it would also provide her with insights into the healthcare system that no medical textbook could have taught her. Maya approached the triage desk where Nurse Patricia Williams sat, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun that matched the stern expression permanently etched across her weathered face. Patricia had worked the night shift at St. Mary's for 15 years and had developed what she considered a keen eye for distinguishing real emergencies from what she privately called frequent flyers, people seeking drugs attention, or both. Her worldview had been shaped by years of seeing the worst humanity had to offer, and she had developed a cynical outlook that colored every patient interaction. "Excuse me," Maya said quietly, her voice strained with both physical pain and the effort of remaining composed. "I'm experiencing severe chest pain that started about 3 hours ago. It's radiating down my left arm and I'm having trouble breathing. I think I might be having a cardiac event and I need to be seen immediately." Patricia barely looked up from her computer screen where she was updating patient records with practiced efficiency. "Chest pain," she said in a tone that suggested she had heard this complaint 1,000 times before. "On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate your pain level, and when was the last time you were in an emergency room seeking pain medication?" Maya's eyebrows furrowed in confusion and growing irritation. "I would rate this as an 8 or 9, and I've never been to this hospital before. As a patient, I don't use drugs, recreational or otherwise. I'm telling you, I think I'm having a heart attack and I need medical attention right now." Patricia finally glanced up, her experienced eyes quickly assessing Maya's appearance. Young woman wearing casual clothes, coming in during the early morning hours with chest pain complaints and no apparent distress visible from across the desk. In Patricia's extensive experience, this combination often spelled trouble. She had seen countless drug seekers over the years and had developed what she believed was an infallible radar for detecting them. "Sure honey," Patricia said with a heavy sigh that conveyed her skepticism. "Everyone thinks their pain is the worst they've ever felt and everyone thinks they're having a heart attack. Take a seat in the waiting area and we'll get to you when we can. It's going to be a while though, we've got real emergencies to deal with tonight." The phrase "real emergencies" hit Maya like a physical blow. She felt the pain in her chest intensifying, not just from the cardiac symptoms but from the emotional hurt of being dismissed so cavalierly before she had even been given a chance to properly explain her medical history or the specifics of her presentation. Maya stared at Patricia for a moment, fighting every instinct to reveal her credentials and demand proper treatment. She had learned over her years in medicine that sometimes you had to let the system work even when it worked against you. "How long is a while exactly?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice level and professional. Patricia shrugged without looking up from her screen. "Could be 4 hours, could be 6, depends on what comes through those doors. Anything more urgent than your situation is going to take priority, and honey, on a night like this that's pretty much everything." Maya walked back to the waiting area, her legs feeling unsteady as the pain continued to build in waves. She found a seat in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs that seemed designed to discourage lingering and tried to process what had just happened. She had presented to an emergency room with classic symptoms of acute coronary syndrome and had been dismissed without so much as a set of vital signs taken or a basic assessment performed. It was a level of medical negligence that would have shocked her had she not been living it herself. Around her, the emergency department maintained its steady rhythm of controlled chaos. Security guards monitored the entrances, nurses hurried between patient rooms, and the occasional overhead page echoed through the corridors calling doctors to various locations throughout the hospital. Maya watched as other patients were called back for treatment, some with what appeared to be minor complaints, while she continued to wait, her symptoms worsening with each passing minute. Dr. Robert Henderson emerged from one of the treatment rooms, his white coat pristine despite the late hour. He was the attending physician on duty, a man in his early 50s with graying temples and the kind of confidence that came from decades of emergency medicine practice. As he approached the triage desk, his eyes swept across the waiting room with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to making rapid assessments of multiple patients simultaneously. "How are we doing tonight, Patricia?" he asked, leaning against the desk and glancing at the patient board that tracked wait times and bed assignments. Patricia gestured vaguely toward the waiting room. "The usual Friday night crowd," she replied. "Got a young woman over there claiming chest pain, probably looking for narcotics given her presentation. Classic drug-seeking behavior if you ask me." Dr. Henderson followed her gaze to Maya, who was sitting quietly, her hand pressed to her chest and her face showing clear signs of distress. Something about her posture caught his attention. The way she carried herself with dignity despite obvious discomfort suggested this might not be as straightforward as Patricia assumed, but before he could comment further, his pager buzzed with an urgent code blue and he hurried away to handle the cardiac arrest in the intensive care unit. Over the next hour, Maya watched as the emergency department processed patient after patient. A middle-aged businessman with minor back pain was seen within 30 minutes. An elderly woman complaining of fatigue was taken back shortly after. A young man with what appeared to be a minor laceration received immediate attention while Maya remained in her plastic chair, her name never called, her pain acknowledged by no one except herself. The discomfort in her chest had evolved from sharp stabbing sensations to a crushing pressure that made each breath an effort. Waves of nausea washed over her in regular intervals and she found herself breaking into cold sweats despite the air conditioning. These were textbook symptoms that any first-year medical student would recognize as signs of acute myocardial infarction, but from her position in the waiting room, Maya was just another young person seeking attention in the eyes of the overwhelmed night staff. Dr. Sarah Kim, the chief of emergency medicine, was reviewing the night's admissions in her office, trying to identify patterns and inefficiencies that might improve patient care. Dr. Kim was known throughout the hospital for her meticulous attention to detail and her insistence on thorough patient evaluation. She had built her reputation on catching cases that others missed, and she took pride in maintaining the highest standards of care in her department even during the busiest shifts. As she scrolled through the electronic health records, Dr. Kim noticed an unusual pattern in the triage notes. Several patients with relatively minor complaints had been processed quickly while others with potentially serious symptoms remained in the waiting room for extended periods. This kind of discrepancy always raised red flags for Dr. Kim, who understood that emergency medicine was as much about pattern recognition as it was about individual patient assessment. She walked out to the main emergency department floor and surveyed the organized chaos of the night shift. Her experienced eye immediately landed on Maya, who was now visibly struggling with worsening symptoms, pale, diaphoretic, and clearly in significant distress. Dr. Kim's years of training and experience told her this was someone who needed immediate medical attention, not someone who should be sitting in a waiting room chair. "Patricia," she called out, approaching the triage desk, "tell me about the patient in the Georgetown sweatshirt. What's her presenting complaint and why hasn't she been brought back for evaluation?" Patricia glanced over at Maya with obvious dismissal. "Young woman claims chest pain, but it's clearly drug-seeking behavior. She came in with all the classic signs, asking for pain medication immediately. No real distress visible, just the usual act they put on when they want narcotics. I've seen it hundreds of times before." Dr. Kim frowned, her expression growing stern. "What makes you so certain this is drug-seeking behavior? What assessment have you performed and what objective findings support your conclusion?" "Well," Patricia replied, shifting uncomfortably, "she's young, came in during the early morning hours with vague chest pain complaints, and she was immediately asking about when she'd be seen. That's the typical pattern for drug seekers. They want attention fast and they get agitated when they have to wait." "Did you obtain vital signs?" Dr. Kim asked, her tone becoming more pointed. "Did you perform an electrocardiogram? Did you draw cardiac enzymes or perform any diagnostic testing whatsoever to rule out acute coronary syndrome?" Patricia's confidence began to waver slightly under Dr. Kim's scrutiny. "I didn't see the need," she said defensively. "Like I told you, it was obvious what she was after based on her presentation and demeanor." Dr. Kim's expression hardened into something approaching anger. "Patricia, you know our protocols. Every chest pain patient gets a proper triage assessment regardless of age or your personal assumptions about their motivations. I want full vital signs on her immediately, an EKG within 10 minutes, and I want her in a treatment room within the next 15 minutes. "But Dr. Kim," Patricia protested, "with all due respect, I've been doing this for 15 years and I know drug-seeking behavior when I see it. We can't just cater to every person who walks in here with complaints designed to get them pain medication. And I've been practicing emergency medicine for 20 years, Dr. Kim replied sharply. "What I see is a young woman in obvious distress who hasn't received proper medical evaluation because of assumptions and biases that have no place in healthcare. Get her triaged properly now or I'll find someone who will." Patricia reluctantly gathered her triage equipment and approached Maya, her attitude clearly conveying her belief that this was an unnecessary waste of time and resources. "We need to take your vital signs," she announced without preamble or empathy. Maya nodded, relief flooding through her that finally someone was taking her complaint seriously. As Patricia wrapped the blood pressure cuff around her arm, Maya tried once more to provide relevant medical history. "The pain started as sharp and stabbing but has progressed to a crushing sensation in my chest. I'm experiencing nausea, diaphoresis and shortness of breath. I have a family history of premature coronary artery disease and—" "Just hold still," Patricia interrupted, focusing on the blood pressure reading rather than listening to Maya's detailed history. As the numbers appeared on the digital monitor, Patricia's confident expression began to falter. Maya's blood pressure was dangerously elevated at 190/110. Her heart rate was rapid and irregular at 120 beats per minute and her oxygen saturation was below normal at 88%. Patricia rechecked the readings, hoping she had made an error, but the numbers remained consistently abnormal, indicating that Maya was indeed experiencing a serious medical emergency. The realization that she had potentially missed a life-threatening condition began to sink in as the objective data contradicted everything she had assumed about Maya's presentation. "I need to get Dr. Henderson," Patricia said, her voice suddenly lacking its earlier certainty and carrying a note of panic that Maya couldn't help but notice despite her own distress. Dr. Henderson appeared within minutes, taking one look at Maya's vital signs and immediately recognizing the gravity of the situation. He ordered her transfer to a treatment room stat and began barking orders for immediate diagnostic testing, including a 12-lead electrocardiogram, chest X-ray and cardiac enzyme panel. The entire dynamic of Maya's emergency department experience shifted in an instant from dismissal and neglect to urgent medical attention. In treatment room 7, Maya was quickly connected to cardiac monitors while nurses drew blood for laboratory analysis and prepared her for further testing. Dr. Henderson began a proper history and physical examination, his demeanor professional and focused rather than dismissive and prejudicial. "How long have you been experiencing these symptoms?" he asked while listening to her heart and lungs with his stethoscope. "About 4.5 hours now," Maya replied. "The pain has been steadily worsening and I've developed additional symptoms including the nausea and difficulty breathing." I tried to explain this to the triage nurse but she seemed convinced I was seeking drugs. Dr. Henderson's expression grew grim as he reviewed her EKG results which showed clear signs of ST elevation myocardial infarction indicating that Maya was having a massive heart attack, the kind that required immediate intervention to prevent permanent heart muscle damage or death. "We need to get cardiology down here immediately," he told the nurse, "and prepare her for emergency cardiac catheterization. This is a STEMI and every minute counts." The news spread through the emergency department like wildfire. The young woman they had dismissed as a drug seeker was actually experiencing a life-threatening heart attack that required immediate intervention to save her life. The entire night shift staff suddenly realized how close they had come to a preventable tragedy that would have haunted their careers forever. Dr. Kim appeared at Maya's bedside as the cardiology team prepared for emergency intervention. "I am deeply sorry for the delay in your care," she said with genuine remorse. "What happened tonight is completely unacceptable and represents a failure of our system and our values." Maya, despite her pain and fear, managed a weak smile. "I appreciate that, Dr. Kim, but there's something else you should know about me that might help you understand why this happened and why it's so important to address." Dr. Kim leaned closer, intrigued by what Maya might reveal that could shed light on the night's events. "My name is Dr. Maya Patel," Maya said quietly, her voice steady despite her physical distress. "I'm the Assistant Chief of Cardiology at Johns Hopkins Hospital. I specialize in exactly the kind of emergency I'm currently experiencing. I came here tonight specifically because I wanted to be treated like any other patient without the privilege that comes with my professional status." The words hit Dr. Kim like a thunderbolt. The implications of what Maya had just revealed were staggering. They hadn't just misdiagnosed a patient, they had misdiagnosed a colleague, and not just any colleague but one of the most respected young cardiologists in the region, someone whose expertise in treating exactly this condition was recognized nationally. "Oh my God," Dr. Kim whispered, her face going pale as the full weight of the situation settled over her. "Dr. Patel, I am so profoundly sorry. This is beyond inexcusable. What happened here tonight represents everything that's wrong with healthcare bias, and it nearly cost you your life." Maya shook her head weakly. "Right now let's focus on treating the heart attack," she said with the calm professionalism that had made her reputation. "We can discuss the systemic issues later, but I want you to know that this experience has given me insights into patient care that no medical conference or journal article ever could." As Maya was rushed to the cardiac catheterization laboratory, word of what had happened spread throughout St. Mary's Hospital like wildfire. The nursing staff, the attending physicians, the residents, and the hospital administration all began to grapple with the reality that their own biases and assumptions had nearly cost a distinguished colleague her life. The incident forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about the prejudices that influenced medical decision-making. Patricia Williams sat in the break room staring at her hands and replaying the night's events in her mind. She had been so confident in her assessment, so certain that she could identify drug-seeking behavior from across the room. Now she realized that her assumptions had been based not on medical evidence or clinical judgment but on prejudices she hadn't even been consciously aware she harbored. The knowledge that her bias had nearly killed someone would haunt her for the rest of her career. Dr. Henderson found himself questioning every decision he had made that night. As an experienced emergency physician, he prided himself on his diagnostic skills and his ability to prioritize patients based on the severity of their conditions, but he had allowed himself to be influenced by the triage nurse's assessment rather than conducting his own independent evaluation. It was a mistake that could have had fatal consequences. In the cardiac catheterization lab, Dr. Michael Torres, the interventional cardiologist on call, worked quickly to open Maya's blocked coronary artery using a balloon angioplasty and stent placement. As Maya's colleague and friend from medical school, Dr. Torres was both professionally focused and personally devastated by what had happened. "Maya, you're going to be fine," he assured her as he worked. "We caught it in time, but it was closer than it should have been, much closer." "I know, Mike," Maya replied, her voice weak but steady. "Just do what you do best and then help me figure out how to make sure this never happens to anyone else." The procedure was successful and Maya's condition began to stabilize immediately, but as she lay in the cardiac intensive care unit recovering, the broader implications of what had happened began to unfold throughout St. Mary's Hospital and beyond. Word of the incident reached the hospital's board of directors, the medical staff leadership, and eventually the media, creating a firestorm of scrutiny and soul-searching. Dr. Kim called an emergency meeting of the entire emergency department staff for the following morning. As they gathered in the main conference room, the weight of the previous night's events was visible on every face. They all knew that they had collectively failed in their most basic duty as healthcare providers to evaluate and treat patients without bias or prejudice. "I want everyone to understand what happened last night," Dr. Kim began, her voice steady but filled with disappointment. "We nearly lost a patient because we allowed our assumptions and biases to override our medical training and professional obligations." Dr. Maya Patel is not just any patient. She's one of the most respected cardiologists in the region and an expert in exactly the condition we failed to properly diagnose. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. But even if she had been anyone else, even if she had been homeless, mentally ill, or struggling with addiction, she would have deserved the same level of care and attention that we failed to provide last night. What happened exposes serious flaws in our approach to patient care, and it's going to change how we do business. Over the following days, as Maya recovered from her heart attack, St. Mary's Hospital underwent a comprehensive review of its emergency department protocols. Patient advocates were brought in to interview staff and identify systemic biases that could affect patient care. New training programs were implemented to address unconscious prejudices that healthcare providers might harbor without realizing it. Maya herself, once she was stable enough, participated actively in discussions about what had happened. Rather than pursuing legal action or filing formal complaints, she chose to use the incident as a teaching moment for the entire medical community. Her response impressed everyone at St. Mary's, but it also highlighted the professionalism and grace under pressure that had made her one of the youngest department heads in Johns Hopkins history. "This isn't about blame," Maya told the hospital administration during one of their meetings. "This is about recognizing that even well-intentioned healthcare providers can fall victim to biases that compromise patient care. We need to build systems that protect against these human tendencies and ensure that every patient receives appropriate evaluation regardless of their appearance, their insurance status, or their perceived social circumstances." Her gracious response to the incident drew attention from medical organizations across the country. Maya was invited to speak at conferences and medical schools, sharing her unique perspective as both a distinguished physician and a victim of medical bias. Her message was always the same: excellent medical care required not just technical skill and medical knowledge but also the wisdom to see past assumptions and treat every patient with dignity and respect. The story of what happened that night at St. Mary's began to spread throughout the medical community, becoming a powerful case study in medical schools and residency programs across the nation. It served as proof that even the most experienced healthcare providers could harbor dangerous biases, and that systemic changes were needed to protect patients from receiving substandard care based on prejudicial assumptions. Patricia Williams initially requested a transfer to a different department, unable to face continuing to work in emergency medicine after nearly causing a colleague's death, but Dr. Kim and Maya both encouraged her to stay and learn from the experience. "Running away won't help future patients," Maya told her during a visit, "but becoming a better nurse because of what happened here will help hundreds of people in the years to come." Patricia eventually agreed to stay and became one of the most vocal advocates for bias training in the hospital. She used her own experience as an example of how dangerous assumptions could be even for experienced healthcare providers with good intentions. Her transformation from skeptic to advocate became part of the broader cultural change at St. Mary's. Dr. Henderson also took the incident as a wake-up call about his own practice patterns. He implemented new protocols for his patient evaluations, insisting on personally assessing every patient rather than relying solely on triage notes or assumptions made by others. "We can't let other people's biases become our biases," he told his residents. "Every patient deserves a fresh evaluation from every member of their healthcare team." The changes at St. Mary's were comprehensive and lasting. New policies required multiple independent assessments for any patient waiting more than 2 hours in the emergency department. Bias training became mandatory for all staff members at every level, from housekeeping to attending physicians. Patient advocates were stationed permanently in the emergency department to ensure that concerns were heard and addressed promptly. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. The staff began to approach each patient with the assumption that their symptoms were real and deserving of proper evaluation. Rather than looking for reasons to dismiss or minimize complaints, they began looking for ways to provide compassionate, comprehensive care regardless of a patient's appearance, background, or insurance status. Maya returned to Johns Hopkins a month later, fully recovered from her heart attack but forever changed by her experience as a patient. She carried with her a deeper understanding of what it felt like to be dismissed, ignored, and judged by the very system she had dedicated her life to serving. That perspective made her a more empathetic physician and a more effective advocate for patient rights. At Johns Hopkins, Maya implemented many of the same changes that had been instituted at St. Mary's. She shared her story with colleagues, medical students, and anyone who would listen. Her message remained consistent: excellent medical care required not just technical expertise but also the wisdom to see past assumptions and treat every patient with the dignity and respect they deserved. The incident also had a profound impact on medical education. Maya was invited to speak at medical schools across the country, sharing her experience and the lessons learned from it. Her presentations always focused on the same key themes: the dangers of unconscious bias, the importance of thorough patient evaluation, and the need for healthcare systems to protect against human prejudices that could compromise patient care. Years later, Maya would often reflect on that night at St. Mary's Hospital. While the experience had been terrifying and potentially life-threatening, it had also given her a unique perspective that made her a better doctor and a more effective advocate for healthcare reform. She never forgot the feeling of being dismissed and ignored, and she made sure that every patient under her care knew that their concerns would be heard and their pain would be taken seriously. The transformation at St. Mary's Hospital became a model for healthcare institutions around the world. The St. Mary's Protocol was adopted by hundreds of hospitals, incorporating bias training, patient advocacy, and systematic safeguards against discriminatory treatment. The changes implemented after Maya's experience probably saved more lives than any single medical breakthrough or technological advancement. Dr. Kim often said that while the incident had been one of the worst moments in her career, the changes it sparked had probably prevented thousands of similar tragedies. The recognition that even good people with good intentions could harbor dangerous biases had led to systemic changes that protected vulnerable patients from receiving substandard care based on prejudicial assumptions. Maya's story became legendary in medical circles, not as a tale of malpractice or discrimination but as a powerful reminder of the humanity that must be at the center of all medical care. It served as proof that sometimes the most important medicine wasn't found in a prescription pad or an operating room but in the simple act of truly seeing and listening to the person seeking help. The young woman who had been dismissed as a drug seeker had revealed herself to be not just a distinguished physician but a catalyst for positive change that would benefit countless patients for years to come. Her hidden identity had indeed shaken the hospital to its core, but in the best possible way, forcing everyone to confront their biases and commit to providing better care for all patients regardless of who they appeared to be. In the end, Maya's story proved that the most powerful medicine sometimes came not from advanced technology or breakthrough treatments but from treating every person with dignity, respect, and the careful attention they deserved. Her experience at St. Mary's had nearly cost her life, but it had also sparked a revolution in how hospitals thought about patient care, bias, and the fundamental humanity that must guide all medical practice. Because healing wasn't just about diagnosing and treating diseases, it was about seeing and honoring the person behind every patient, every symptom, and every call for help. And there you have it, a brilliant cardiologist dismissed as a drug seeker who stunned an entire hospital by revealing her true identity. The emergency room erupted, the biased staff faced consequences, and a healthcare system that nearly failed found a way to transform itself. Dr. Maya Patel's story shows us that assumptions can be deadly, but truth and expertise will always prevail when given the chance. If you were moved by Maya's resilience, inspired by the hospital's transformation, or outraged by the initial bias, we invite you to make your voice heard. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to the 8th Theory for more tales that challenge assumptions and remind us why every patient deserves dignity and respect, because sometimes the person you underestimate is exactly the person whose expertise could save your life.